So good day, everyone. It could be morning, afternoon, evening where you are. So good day. God bless. I am back with Dustin Quick. He and I had a fantastic conversation not that long ago. It's on the channel. You can have a look. I think was it 2 weeks ago? Was it last week? I can't
Last
remember.
week. Last week.
Your audio. I'm not hearing your audio.
Oh, how about now?
Suddenly you're. Just speak again, please.
How about now?
Oh, you're back. Sorry, that was my
Oh,
fault.
oh,
Somehow my audio was turned off. That was okay. I hear you
Lloyd,
now.
how dare you? You scared me.
No, sorry. No, somehow when I went live, my audio got turned off. Very, very strange. Let me check my settings.
Yep.
Make sure everything is good. Okay, everything's healthy here. So yeah, anyway, welcome everyone. Last week we had 90 viewers. That was great. I got the numbers. That was really fantastic in the live.
Great.
We've had over 1,000 views, well over 1,000, so it's so great. So Dustin, welcome back. Please let everyone know what you've been up to, what's happening on your channel, and then I can do my little intro and housekeeping, and then we'll pick up the conversation.
Sounds great, brother. Well, I'm honored and blessed to be back. So thank you for having me. Happy Pentecost Sunday to you and to everyone out there. It was kind of a rush because I went to church this morning and we had some I didn't know about the baptisms taking place, so I had to literally rush back here, be on time for the show. I was scrambling and frantic, but here I am. So thanks be to God. Very blessed. And I hope you are too out there, whoever's watching and viewing today. So as far as what I've been doing, my channel is Holy Smokes, Cigars, Catholicism, and Conversation for anybody who doesn't know. Episodes so far, my last one was with Connie Marshner, the wife of the Catholic scholar William Marshner. And we discussed her book, Monastery and High Cross, The Forgotten Eastern Roots of Irish Christianity, which is extremely interesting. So the thesis, which is well supported, is that the majority of the practice that came to Ireland was not from St. Patrick per se, although she did credit him with the conversion of Ireland. But before his arrival, there were already Egyptian monks there. And this would explain the practices of things like private confession, doing the 150 Psalms in a cruciform position, the beehive huts, the system of 7 churches or monasteries, like all these things, the Egyptian papyri with palm trees on them found in bogs in Ireland. So there's all these.
Just say that again. Please just repeat that bit about the palm trees, please.
Yeah. So there was a, I don't know what to call it, a sort of a liturgical book, I think you would call it. It had Egyptian papyrus, and it was leather bound, and I think inside it had a decoration or some kind of thing of a palm tree, which you wouldn't expect to find in Ireland.
Well, what year is this book from? Estimated.
Maybe the 4th century or later, but there is a system of wells in Ireland called holy wells, and there's a saint associated with each well. And in this one in particular, we don't know anything about the saint, but his name is Saint Olin, and the inscription on the stone reads Saint Olin or pray for Saint Olin of Egypt. So this would have been before the arrival of Saint Patrick. So very interesting.
That is unusual. Well, the reason I responded to that way was the concept of the palm tree. This might seem really odd, and you mentioned the 4th century, which is appropriate, or more or less appropriate, in that the palm tree is associated with a church called, have you heard of the Church of the Cathcisma?
Yeah, I watched that whole stream with intent. So yes.
Yes, so the palm tree is an unusual symbolism, and that was linked to the Church of the Cathcisma, which was obviously demolished and completely buried under rubble, and I think deliberately so in the 11th century to hide, I believe at one time, and this would seem to be now the growing consensus amongst Western scholars, that at one time Islam was a movement that was an ecumenical movement between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam to all follow monotheism. However, this does not mean that this was Orthodox Judaism or Orthodox Christianity. It seems to be, and I'm busy doing some work right now. Today I was working on notes. I'm going through a lot of, I wouldn't say obscure, but less well-known, and some obscure research that starts to clarify some of the Gnostic roots of Islam. But I wonder if this has a link to the Church of the Kathisma in Jerusalem, which is obviously the Church of the Seat of Mary, which would then link to a very old Marian shrine, which seems to have been possibly the original nativity shrine till it was destroyed and then moved to Bethlehem. So that's really, I wonder, I mean, that's just a curiosity, because the palm tree is such an unusual symbol.
It is, and we see that story in the Quran where Mary's under the palm tree, right? So yeah. I wonder where they got that from.
You have to ask, and I'm sure there's more to it. Yeah, that's fascinating. So tell us more, and what else was interesting about that? I'm really curious to know. I mean, she sounds like an interesting guest.
Yeah, very. She's actually Irish herself, and during COVID, she did a master's program online to learn modern Irish, and she was just fascinated by the Celtic Christianity. There's this whole myth going around that, you know, Celtic Christianity was like a hodgepodge of Christianity and Celtic paganism and all that, but no, she shows it comes from the East, comes from Armenia, Egypt, most specifically Alexandria, and it was pure patristic Christianity. And what I found interesting was, for example, so confession used to be once a year, done in public, right? Which I already knew from a friend of mine named Dr. Jim Papandrea. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a patristic scholar, and I've had him on my channel many times. I actually had the pleasure of meeting him in Florida and going out to dinner with his family, so that was a great blessing. But he's a great scholar. If anybody's looking for his channel, just type in Jim Papandrea on YouTube. He has this great series called The Original Church, where he dispels a lot of myths about the original church and gives you a lot of interesting information. So one of the things that I found interesting was, confession was once a year, done in public. It was a severe penance, usually depending on the severity of the sin. But the Irish church actually introduced, and this was based on monasticism, is the practice of having a spiritual father or confessor to whom you would confess your sins in private. So that we can actually attribute or accredit the Irish with the practice of private confession, and that's where it comes from. They also can be credited with the concept of reserving the Blessed Sacrament in a tabernacle. This was their child, if you will. And one of the things that they used to do was they wore it's called a chrismal. And they had like a leather strap around their neck, and inside they would have anointing oil and a piece of the Eucharist, and they used to hang it around their neck. And there were severe penances and penalties for those who misused or abused the chrismal or dropped it on the ground. So, and there's a palm tree behind me, and there's Mary behind me. Look at that. How providential is that?
Villainous always asks the most interesting questions. He's an Australian, very, very, very astute, really astute guy. Asks great questions, very observant.
Yeah, I've seen some of his questions on your chat before. Hello, great to see you here. Great to have y'all here. Villainous, it's nice to meet you. If you don't mind, Lloyd, just give me a second. I'm going to try and light my cigar because it went out. I've got a fan going in here, so I got to try to dodge the wind here.
Yeah, as everyone knows, the standard punishment for being late to the channel start is 5 push-ups, right? So that's the standard punishment I levy on all my viewers. Although,
I don't know if I can do that.
So yes, welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. So my second conversation with Dustin, and that's really interesting what you have to say. So I mean, this shows us there are more complex, deeper, richer roots to the beginnings of early Christianity than is anticipated. Right now, I'm working. You know that I'm working on multiple strands of research. I'm going through. It's an effort to collect all this stuff together and then collate it and then search through it, sift through it. Even with technology, it takes time. And then I've got to write and edit all my notes and still make loads of typos. So at least I do guarantee my audience free typos. But I'm starting to put together a lot of stuff now on the Quran. I've been putting together notes on the myth that is the idea that the Quran is unchanged, that the Quran is perfectly preserved. And one of the things that I have done recently, and it's attracted a lot of interest, and of course, just basic propaganda, I wouldn't even say apologetics from Muslims, is that you ask, okay, which one is the original Quran that was sent down? What is the wording that was sent down to Muhammad originally? There is not a single Muslim on earth that can show you, not one. Nobody knows, because we are not trying to find the Muhammadan Quran. We are all trying to find the quote unquote Uthmanic Quran. And we don't even have an original Uthmani Quran. So the Qurans we have are at bare minimum 3 removed from Muhammad. Because no one knows what the Muhammadan Quran. And then when people talk about, oh, what about the Birmingham Quran? We have an old Quran. It goes to 4000 BC. The Birmingham Quran is 2 whole pages. It's 2 entire pages. And in fact, those pages are fragments of 2 or 3 chapters. And they contain Christian apocrypha and Gnostic texts. Do you think that defines a Quran, Dustin?
No, I don't think so.
So it's a Quran, Arabic Quran. The style of writing is late. It's not early because it's got the dotted letters and so on. So it's clearly a more advanced, not the early consonantal script. And it's got a style of embellishment, colored inks and so on that is clearly late. And it also differs in wording and so on from modern Qurans. Now, also Muslims claim that, well, the Quran was always memorized and all the differences are merely pronunciation. Well, if the differences are merely pronunciation, you wouldn't have grammatical differences, you wouldn't have type differences, you wouldn't have spelling differences, you wouldn't have word differences. So, right. So if it's just pronunciation, you should have only the same dot for dot, letter for letter. There is literally no evidence. And in fact, overwhelmingly Muslim sources overwhelmingly tell us that the Quran was never preserved. Multiple modes of recitation, as they call them, very politely, very, it's a whitewashing, but multiple versions, variants, multiple, as they say, readings was the norm, not the exception. And in fact, if the Quran was memorized in 1907, Al-Azhar University, at the insistence of their King Fuad, I believe, he asked Al-Azhar to create a canonical version of the Quran, which was the definitive version. And it took them 17 years to figure out what the correct Quran was. Now, we're told they could simply it's memorized, right? So just recite it and write it down. But apparently it took them the best, oldest Islamic university in the world took 17 years until 1924 to figure out what the correct reading was. They then had to update it in 1936, and in 1984, 1985, the Saudis put out their own version of the Quran. And the Egyptians no longer use the 1924 Quran as their majority Quran. They use what's a different version called the Warsh. They no longer use the Hafs, they use the Warsh. And so now they've got, which has differences in wording, in grammar, stylistic differences. So, and it's supposedly perfectly preserved. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I remember as a Muslim hearing, if you got rid of all the Bibles today, nobody would be able to recall the scriptures. But the miracle of the Quran is if you destroyed every physical copy, you would have it from start to finish. All somebody had to do was recite it.
Understood. Yeah. In fact, hold on. Let me bring something up. Let's go here quickly. Let me go here. These are the transmitters of the Quran. These are the 19 known, or let's say 19 accepted transmitters, or 18 of them, 19. These are the 19 accepted transmitters of the Quran. Now, the reason I bring these up is that you have 7 canonical readings, which they say are just, right, which are actually these are variant Qurans. These are variants. They have differences in orthography. And orthography is like in the US, you say faucet and we say tap. You guys say color with an O-R and we say color with an O-U-R. That is not dot for dot, letter for letter unchanged. But then you can also have, when you have the consonantal text without the dot thing, without the vowels, the letters CK could be cook, could be cake, right? So I baked a cake. I told him to cook a chicken. The word is completely different. So that is not dot for dot, letter for letter preservation. So now I've got the 7 readers. And then what happened was traditionally, because there were variants, to each reader, there were added 2 transmitters, 2 disciples of the original reader who supposedly preserved and transmitted that version of the Quran. And so you've got this. Hold on. Let me bring this up. Let me find. I'm just going to find it. Okay, here we go. For instance, I'll give an example. This is the common narrative. If you go through the Encyclopedia of Islam, which is the gold academic standard, you're going to find the 7, the 3, and the 4. These are the 7 canonical readers,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then you've got later 3 more readers were added. Then later on, 4 more readers were added. So you have the 7, the 3, and the 4. Except for the fact that you've got the 7, the 14, and the 9 as well. So you've got the 7, then you've got the 14 transmitters, then you've got an additional. So up to 936 with Ibn Mujahid, you had 7 readers. Then you had 14 transmitters. Don't ask me what the 14th was. I lost it somehow. And then the 9. So look at 1194, more were added. And in 1429, more were added. I'll just zoom in here so everyone can see that. In fact, I'll just bring that up. And I can go through copious historical references from historians where I showed something from 1730 from a very early historian who stated that he had at least 7 versions of the Quran. And he said some had 6,200 verses, some had 6,300, some had 6,500, some had 6,122 verses. So they had different numbers of verses, no verse numbering. It's all really interesting. And then I wanted to show. Now I've lost the place that I had earlier. But your thoughts on that? Because you were a Muslim, and were you aware of all of these differences back then?
Gosh, no. I was just fed the standard narrative that there were variant readings based off of like Arabic dialect, but the meaning was the same. The Quran was the exact same. I heard stories about a sheep eating. I think it was part of Surah Al-Azab.
Here it is. I'll just bring this up. Wow. FM Night to the Immaculate Heart. Thank you very much for that donation. And thank you, Matthew. No, we appreciate it. We appreciate your support, and thank you. Yes, you were saying? This is the...
there was extra surahs, but like a sheep ate one, and some just got lost. And I guess what you could say apologetically as a Muslim is, well, Allah didn't intend those extra verses or chapters to be in the Quran anyway. What he willed was the final version, and that's what we have. So providentially, he guided the process to make it work out the way that it did. So all these variants and extra surahs and everything doesn't really matter. What matters is the finished product, because that's ultimately what Allah
one
willed.
Is the finished product.
Right, exactly. Which one? Yeah.
I have to ask, because this is the original set of transmitters, as I mentioned earlier. But then this gets very, very complicated. Now, why would a canonical Quran be established in 1924 if we had? And don't forget, Al-Azhar destroyed all the other Qurans prior to that because those were full of errors. So and it's blasphemy under Islam. It's to destroy a Quran, to just dump it in the Nile.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. No, I never knew of this in depth like this. This is news to me, to be honest. I was just, like I said, I was just fed the standard narrative. So
okay. Well, can we go through this for a little bit and get your perspective and your thoughts, and then
yeah, absolutely. Whatever you want to do.
You've got incredible experience on both sides of the fence, on multiple sides of the fence, in fact. So you speak from a perspective that few have. This is an 1891 book. Right, George Sale he died in the 1700s. He was born in the late 1600s. He says here, I have never yet seen any manuscript where the verses are actually numbered. And he says the chief disagreement between their several editions of the Quran consists in the division and number of the verses. He says different editions of the Quran, right? There are 7 principal editions. The first of Medina makes the number of verses 6,000. The second and fifth, 6,214. 6219, 6236, 6226, and the last 6225.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, it's ironic because when you bring this stuff out and then you hear about all the Muslim critiques of the Bible and textual criticism and variant manuscripts and all that, and that's like shoved in our face as if this is somehow a shot against Christianity. But the same charge can be leveled at them. But of course, they don't bring this history out, especially if they want to get a convert as a notch under their belt, like me. They love the
Mhm.
white convert, so
Okay.
they feed them this surface level stuff. And for example, the crucifixion of Jesus, right? I was told that, oh, the Quran vouches for the substitution theory, and just it was taken for granted, but that's not actually true. In fact, I think I remember reading in Tabari in his history, he actually
Mhm.
affirmed the historical crucifixion of Jesus, although he didn't attach any salvific importance to it or anything like that. It was just a
Okay.
fact of history.
Right.
So they don't tell you this stuff.
Okay.
You have to dig and dig.
What did they teach you about the Sharia? Because look, when you do surveys, you go to Afghanistan or Pakistan, 70 to 98% of the population wants the Sharia. You go to the UK,
Uh-huh.
you go into the Muslim areas, 70 plus percent of the population wants the Sharia. Now, what is the Sharia? And have they taught you what it is? Because few people know what the Sharia is. And I don't know, were you taught the Sharia? Was that just an assumption or just a vague term? Or
Um, to me, it was just sort of an amalgamation of certain laws. Like you can only have Sharia established if there's an Islamic state and a Caliph. So we can't establish Sharia now, but various laws like dhimmis paying the tax and apostates being executed, adulterers needed 4 witnesses, and all that. So I was given, like, generally speaking, just various laws that compose the Sharia. That was basically it.
okay. Now, would it be reasonable to say that if Islam is a religion of law and
uh
it claims to have a legal system designed to replace Western legal systems, designed to replace supposedly secular man-made law with the law of Allah, that it has a complete, fully qualified legal system, which is practiced in their court system and learned by legal scholars, lawyers effectively, that we should know what their laws teach because these are derived from their theology, and that obviously the Quran is, like, let's say, a starting point, but it is not a legal text. It's not a history textbook. It's not a science textbook.
mm.
They would then have consequently a corpus of legal texts. Would that be a reasonable assumption to make, or an inference to make?
Yeah, and like what I was wondering, because last time we talked, you spoke about manuals, and from what I gathered, you can go to, like, a few places or a few collections and find, like, extensively what the Sharia actually is.
Yes.
But nobody was able to narrow that down for me and say, "Oh, look here, and you'll find everything laid out." I was just given bits and pieces by certain people at
Okay.
certain times.
Let me find one reference, and then I will actually. Would you be okay if I actually went to a source and actually showed you to
Yeah,
give you some
please.
some direct insight? Okay,
That
let me do.
that book, by the way, sorry to interrupt you, brother. That
Sure.
book that you just passed by with the blue cover, um, I had that book.
This
I,
one.
is that yeah? Is that the thesis that Muhammad is a title? It's actually referring to Jesus, the praised one. Did you hear about this thesis?
Uh, no, and of course I know, but no, I know very well. Speak about it, then I'll add some thoughts. I mean, your thoughts. I think the audience would love to have that conversation and to hear your perspective. I mean, you've got a really good historical knowledge.
Yeah, so they argue that Muhammad was basically an invention. So the person referred to as Muhammad in very early Islam and in the text itself refers to not the name of an individual, but a title. So Muhammad, the one who is praised, and it's actually speaking of Jesus. And it was Al Malik who is responsible for creating the personage of Muhammad and this sort of separate religion that became Islam. But in the
Yes.
beginning, it was just another Christian, sort of influenced by Syriac Christianity kind of religion and text and movement, if you would say. Um,
Yes.
and one thing I found interesting, though, is the Trinity. So Allah has a consort, namely Mary. The two have relations and produce a third God, Jesus. And you have to ask, okay, if the Quran is a warning for all mankind, especially Christians who commit the most grievous sin imaginable that rent the heavens asunder, if this is a final warning to them until the day of judgment, you would think that Allah would get the heresy of the Trinity correct. Okay? But let me ask you this. What Christians in history ever believed that God and Mary had relations and produced a third God, the third of the three, named Jesus?
Only heretics ever had that belief.
I
mean, you had the
couldn't
Manichaeans who believed that Jesus and Mary Magdalene had a child, who were married. That was a Manichaean heresy from the 4th century.
Like, I've never heard of that Trinity anywhere.
Yep.
The closest I could come was the Coloridians, but I never heard the Trinity expounded by them. All I knew is they worship Mary as a goddess and they offered her cakes, but that's all I know about them. I don't know what they even held about the Trinity. So I've never to this day been able to find that sect of Christians that believe that God and Mary had a child and there was 3 gods and the third was Jesus.
Right.
They're Walid. I never found it.
You bring up something really interesting. Have you heard of the Sabians?
I have, yeah, but I don't know exactly what their beliefs were.
Let me actually bring up something that may be of value here, maybe of interest, because I can show people something I'm busy with. Okay, so let me start. Let me just get some other stuff out the way, and let me bring this up, for instance. So let me close that. Okay. Orthodox. Now, this is the book Rethinking Quranic Studies by William Al-Sharif. It's actually a Muslim. So Orthodox Muslim scholars such as Muhammad Qutb and his disciples believe that it is against the Islamic faith to question the Quran because it is the book of God. That is the position of Muslims. It is illegal to... Have I shown you the Sharia ruling on questioning the Quran, questioning Muhammad, questioning Allah? Have I shown you that?
Not the specific ruling, no.
Okay, let's start there. If I may, then I will... Now, this is something my audience has seen, but it might not hurt. Okay. This book is called... This is by Ibn Taymiyyah, Sheikh al-Islam. Muslims are very quick to dismiss anything embarrassing. Sheikh al-Islam is like a saint in the sense that, I mean, Sheikh al-Islam, there's like 29 or 27 or 30, 31 of them throughout Islamic history. These are the top scholars ever to live in Islam, right?
Yeah.
There's another tier called the Mujtahids Mutlaq, the absolute scholars, effectively the perfect scholars, but the unsheathed sword against the one who insults the messenger. Not against Allah, but okay, that's the book. Let's go here.
It's a pretty cool sword, though, I gotta say.
Right. I don't know if I've showed you this. Just read out the first 1 and 2 here for me, please.
So whoever insults the prophet is to be killed, whether they are Muslim or a disbeliever. Killing is prescribed on him, the one who insults the prophet, and it is not permissible to imprison or show favor to him or to ransom him. And any Muslim or non-Muslim who insults the prophet is to be killed, and repentance is not sought from him. Not surprised.
That's the first 3 chapters sorted out. Right? So the contents of this book concern the Islamic ruling upon those who insult the final prophet. Right? So this is the Islamic ruling, the Sharia. Now, there's not one book that contains the Sharia. It is distributed across multiples. So now let's go to the start of chapter 1. Whoever insults the prophet is to be killed, whether they are Muslim or a disbeliever. This is the general view, or known as the consensus, the ijma of the scholars, right? So just have a look through that. Tell me, just read that. And
yeah, the generality of scholars have consensus that whoever insults him is to be killed. The Muslims have unanimous agreement upon killing whoever insults the prophet, and it is the ruling that whoever insults him is to be whoever insults other than him is to be lashed. The consent. So who would that be? Like a scholar or some kind of...
If you insult the companions of Muhammad.
Yeah, the Sahaba, yeah. And this consensus is taken to the consensus from... that's blurry there. The Tabi'un, yeah, and the companions of Allah's messenger. So I never understood, like, I never gave this a second thought, really. I thought, for example, if you insulted the prophet, then if you were taken to court, you'd have the ability to repent and say, no, la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, I believe, I'm sorry. That's not even accepted.
Under strict Sharia. Now, here's the thing. There's so much to explain because Muslims can wiggle around. First of all, there's legal deception, legal lying. Lying is actually obligatory under Islamic law. right, under Islamic law. However, they are also what they call modifying rules. Now, you've got the doctrine of what's called azima and rukhsa. Azima is strictness. Now, ISIS, the Taliban, Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia, not always, not so fully, because they have to modify their behavior to be part of the international community. ISIS and the Taliban didn't care. Al-Qaeda, in their enclaves, they don't care. There they are very strict. They follow azima, strictness. Then there's rukhsa, dispensation. Dispensation allows for even doing the exact opposite of the standard Islamic doctrine and still getting reward because you are still following doctrine. So you can lie, you can eat pork, you can say you're not a Muslim, etc. This is permitted because this is permitted under two separate doctrines called taysir and darura, ease and necessity. To ease an emotional burden on you, you can do something that is in violation of Islamic law because there's a legitimate quote-unquote need, an undefined, unspecified need. And darura is necessity, a have to or else. So you can justify it. So there's these, so this is, and also there's the doctrine of, I can't remember the name exactly. I don't know if it's adab al-jaddal, but there's or that term or another. It's probably another term, but lying is also obligatory in Islam under the Sharia. I mean, I can show you all of that. Now notice here the consensus upon the obligation of killing such a person. Muslims have a consensus that whoever insults Allah or his messenger or rejects anything that has been revealed, such a person is a disbeliever. I do not know anyone who differed concerning the obligation of killing such a person. Now, here's the definition of insult. Scholars have a consensus that whoever insults the messenger, i.e., attributing a defect to him, such a person is a disbeliever. If you do not believe Muhammad is perfect, you must be killed for that.
Wow, this is, I mean, it's not a, it is a surprise in one sense, but in another, it's not really.
And this book goes on for page after page after page like this. This is not a one-off. This continues. We can go page after page. They even speak of the political killing where the imam has the right to call for an assassination. You'll see this here. They call this the political killing. The imam gives a discretionary punishment with killing. The imam can order a hit.
Huh. No kidding.
Now, a couple of days ago, Michael Lofton had Dr. Javad Hashmi on his channel, and I was very interested in seeing that. And I was in the chat, and Javad Hashmi, I was watching the channel, and Luis, something or other, was also moderating. He was conducting the interview. Really.
Louis Dizon, right?
Yeah, that one. And now, I mean, I say this obviously, and I think my audience would agree, but and I understand this. I'm not looking to boast. I am, as far as Westerners go, I am one of the very top Westerners on earth that knows the Sharia. And I say this bluntly. I understand I'd have to prove it, but I'm happy to do that. My channel is filled with this stuff. I know this material extremely well. And now, of course, others are very skeptical because I don't have the letters PhD, which is Latin for piled high and deep after my name. But Javad Hashmi was either in serious error about the Sharia or he was deceiving the audience. And I was posting extracts. As he was talking, I was in real time posting extracts from the Sharia to counter that. And I know he saw that. And eventually he said I was being bigoted. Oh. And so essentially that's what it came down to, you know. So I did write to Michael Lofton. He did invite me to write back. But yeah, anyway, so people are obviously skeptical of my knowledge, my background. But my job is to make sure that these nice people didn't blow things up and murder people. So I have a little bit of a practical background in that sense. Let me go now. So let me go to something else because you asked. So let me do that. Now I'll go straight to the Sharia. Bring up this. Okay, let me bring this up. Later on, I'll go back to some stuff on the Quran, and this is my talk on the Sharia, which is the Muslim Talmud in a sense. It is not. This does not mean it's identical to the Talmud. It is absolutely not, but it's kind of their version of the Talmud in a sense. Right. So now I'm going to go to a section here. Okay. Now there are multiple books that I want to show you this. There are multiple books that are the Sharia. Now remember, you have 4 schools of fiqh, right? 4 schools of jurisprudence. Each one is headed by what's called a mujtahid mutlaq, Hanafi, Hanbali, Shafi, Maliki. They are called the Mujtahids Mutlaq, meaning that they are the absolute scholars. Their word is law. They are infallible. They cannot make an error. They are absolute masters of everything in the Sharia. And their schools fall within this range that I mentioned, the azma and the rukhsa, the strictness versus the dispensation. So Muslims can find their place within this range of obedience, right? There's another thing called, I can't remember the term, but there's another scholar that developed what they called a harmonization of this, and it was called the Great Balance or the Supreme Scales, which shows that he harmonized heavy hand 3. Wow, thank you very much. I'm really grateful. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Well, thank you. No, I mean, look, this is great. I mean, having you on is, I'd love to. Can I invite you again another time? This would be great to have these conversations. Your history knowledge.
I'll come on every week. Honestly, anytime. It's a pleasure.
No, this is great. It's really stimulating. I mean,
But you got to come on my channel too, though. You got to do that.
Of course, you will. No, of course. No, I'd love to have you on again. I mean, this is great. So Pakistani courts and Islamic law. So this is from 2 PhD scholars in Pakistan, and they mentioned these are 4 of them Islamic law books, the 4 fiqh texts that are most commonly used in Islamic courts in Pakistan. The Hidayah, which is the single, they call it the crown jewel of the Hanafi school of fiqh, which is the largest in Islam. Then they have the Digest of Muhammadan Law by Neil Bailey. It's a translation of the Arabic. They used this in British India, British Pakistan at the time, because obviously the Brits couldn't read the Arabic or the Hindu, right?
Right.
So, and Muhammadan Law by Said. So these are the 4 most commonly used. So these Sharia law texts. So let's go to an example. They mentioned here the Digest of Muhammadan Law. I will go to the Hidayah afterwards, right? This is by Shahbaz Ahmed Chima, Professor PhD. You can look up these guys, and Samir Uzir Khan. These are real law professors in Pakistan. This is the Digest of Muhammadan Law, right? This dates back to the 1800s, I believe. And just read that highlighted portion for me, please.
When a man has had sexual intercourse, oh my gosh, I can't even. When a man has had sexual intercourse with a girl under the age of 9 years and has ruptured the parts, it is unlawful for him to have further connection with her. But if she is not released from her ties, if connected with him by marriage or slavery, if no rupture has taken place, the prohibition is not incurred according to the most valid opinion.
Interpret that for me, please.
So basically, if you have a wife under 9 years old and you cause damage to her vagina, you can't have further intercourse with her. But if you don't rupture her, you're permitted to continue doing so.
Yes.
Holy cow.
This is not an isolated law. Do you understand?
Yeah.
I can do a 2-hour show with you discussing only this topic.
My goodness. This is so disturbing. I mean, I always kind of dismissed, that verse in the Quran or verses about the waiting period. You can divorce a woman after 3 months who has not yet menstruated. I thought maybe maybe there's another way to interpret that. But when you go to stuff like this, I mean, it's clear. And plus, there's the Sunnah of Muhammad anyway, who consummated the marriage with Aisha when she was 9. So that is Sunnah.
So it's not in Sunnah, it's Sharia.
Yeah.
This is now the second most common book used in Islamic courts in Pakistan. Let's continue. This is the reliance of the traveler. There's no waiting period. This is a woman's post-marital waiting period, right? Post-marital.
Mm-hmm.
There's no waiting period for a woman divorced before having had sexual intercourse with her husband. All fine and well. This is the law around Quran 65:4.
Okay.
Try this one.
A waiting period is obligatory for a woman divorced after intercourse, whether the husband and wife are, prepubescent, have reached puberty, or one has the other and has not. Intercourse means copulation. If the husband was alone with her but did not copulate with her, then divorced her, there is no waiting period. Whether the husband and wife are, that's different. I haven't considered that possibility. The husband and wife being prepubescent, I haven't considered that possibility at all.
You can have a prepubescent boy as well, married to an
older woman.
Yes.
I thought it was a one-way street. That's insane. Oh my goodness, I had no idea.
Well, because she might need to, for the sake of, let's say she got married to a man, he divorced her. Now she needs to have sex with someone so that she can divorce him and go back to the husband. So she picks a little 5-year-old boy or 10-year-old boy or 9-year-old boy, and they get it on for 10 seconds or 5 seconds or long enough for him to just kind of, play hide the winky for 2 seconds. And then she can divorce him. He can divorce her, and then she can go back to her ex.
Yeah, when I'm laughing, I don't find that. Don't get me wrong, I don't find it funny. It's like it's more shock. Like I'm shocked that I was never told this as a convert. When a woman who has been made, my computer screen's not that clear.
Oh, my bad. No, it's bad. When a woman who has been made love to performs the purificatory bath, and the male's sperm leaves her vagina, she must repeat the ghusl if 2 conditions exist. 1, she is not a child, but rather old enough to have sexual gratification.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to gross my audience out, but here you can read this one. Just read that one.
Yeah, if a person has sexual intercourse with a minor girl, ghusl will not be obligatory on her, but in order to get her into the habit, she should be made to bath.
You understand how all of these laws across different Sharia manuals, it's the same law. Do you understand? This is not a one-off. You can find this consistently repeated across. Look, I'm not going to go into this. We've already covered this one, such as when the accused is a mere infant. You cannot accuse your infant wife of adultery. She's not guilty of having solicited sex. She clearly was not the initiator of the sexual activity. You can't blame her. You must blame the guy.
Yeah, I remember this from last time.
I think that's pretty clear. Now, let's have a look at this. Now they speak of, Muslims will tell you about puberty. So let's have a look at this. So read that, please. This is the Muqtas al-Qaduri. This is effectively an obsolete manual. It's a very basic manual. All of these have been absorbed into the more advanced manuals, but this shows the development of the Sharia. It's a training manual for beginners, really. But read the first law, please.
Yeah, so is it the one with the reaching of puberty of a girl? Is by way of menstruation, nocturnal emission, or pregnancy?
Pause there. Just think about that. We know that you have reached puberty if A, you start menstruating, B, you have a nocturnal emission, or 3, you fall pregnant. We know you are now at puberty because you fell pregnant. Now, how would you know if she wasn't pregnant? How did she get pregnant? Wouldn't you have? Can you put the sum together for me, please?
Yeah, you wouldn't know if she reached puberty if you had not yet had sex with her to find out whether she was pregnant.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's like a game where let's see if she's pregnant, but in order to do so, we have to have sex with her, and then we'll find out. So she may or may not be prepubescent according to Islamic rules.
Yeah. And notice, if none of that exists, she's a minor until 17.
Oh.
The age of puberty is well defined in Islam. Other ones will say 15. Others will say 15, but most settle on 17, it seems. Yes, 17. Let's have a look at this one. Just have a look. If the offender is someone with the capacity to remain a virgin, then he or she is stoned to death, right? If they were an adult and of sound mind when they decided to have sexual intercourse, they will be stoned to death. A person is not considered to have the capacity to remain a virgin if he or she is prepubescent at the time of marital intercourse.
So this isn't an obscure verse in the Quran from the Surah on marriage or the divorce, I should say.
These are the laws. I'm going through various sections on the divorce from multiple different Sharia manuals to show you.
This is consistent across the board. Like there's no guesswork here.
Yeah, this is consistent. I can go through more. I mean, I can do more. I can show up. I can bring up other Sharia manuals which repeat the same thing and reinforce them over and over and over. So understand, I've got more. Actually, let me just bring up the Hidayah. Let me find the Hidayah. So I'm trying to find a specific set of references in the Hidayah. Okay, this is the Hidayah. Now, the Hidayah is the supreme legal text of the Hanafi school. This is it's one of the longest. My version is like, 3,600 pages? It's multiple volumes, thousands of pages. It's very detailed. So notice here, the puberty of a boy is established by circumstances or upon attaining 18 years of age. And a girl by circumstances or upon her attaining 17 years of age, right? Now, it says here, the puberty of a girl is established by menstruation, nocturnal emission, or pregnancy. That's the Hanafi school.
Mm-hmm.
We've just been through the Shafi school. We've been through the Maliki school. Now we're looking at the Hanafi school. I'm finding a pattern here. Are you?
Yeah, it's consistent.
Right. So therefore, I will now. This frustrates me when supposed experts on Islam don't want to take me seriously and claim now the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali schools are real schools of fiqh. This is what they teach when you go become an imam at university in Saudi Arabia, or you pick the country. You're going to study these books. There are no other books. They're going to study the Sharia manuals. They're going to learn these laws. And then when they become judges and lawyers, they're going to practice this in their courts. Now, apparently, I'm a bigot for raising this, and I'm saying, fine, then show me the correct Sharia. Show me the correct Sharia. This is the only one I can find. And then experts who know less than I do, but don't want to be bigoted or racist like me because I'm stating facts, will go, well, Lloyd, you don't have a PhD. I can read.
Yeah, it's gaslighting. I mean, all you're doing is...
I'm being gaslit by lots of good Christians.
All you're doing is reading the sources. You're not doing anything else. You're not giving your personal interpretation or opinion. You're just reading the sources. That's like me reading the church fathers, and some Protestant accuses me of being bigoted against Protestantism. I'm just reading the sources.
Yeah, let me show you the Reliance of the Traveler. Now, this one is, I'll briefly show you this, and then we still want to talk about some more of your journey as well. But do you find this enlightening? I mean, this
yeah, in a very, very disturbing way.
Your ability to explain things is really, you have a fantastic diction and way with words.
So do you, though. I think your vocabulary is bigger than mine, but all varieties of gift, but the same spirit, right? That was right. One of the readings that Master.
So to the audience, I'm not following the conversation for once, because Muhammad is truly bigoted as a Baphomet. Yes, Muhammad is Baphomet according to the Crusades historians, most certainly. Thank you, Matthew. Right, let's okay. This is the Reliance of the Traveler. This is a compendium. It is a synthesis of all four schools of fiqh. It is a Shafi'i book, but that said, these are not different religions. These are simply different variants that are all legal, right? And these are all considered legal within Islam. And this one is a synthesis of the most sound laws drawn from different schools of fiqh, right? And this book is detailed. It is meant really for not necessarily it's got some very complex sections on the bottom at the end in the appendix that's been added, but this is really meant for the lay person to use as well. Whereas, of course, it's a primer for jurists who study at when they go to their imam school, right? But it is not exactly complex. It's designed to simplify this. So they've got here the prayer, the funeral prayer, zakat, fasting, the pilgrimage. We can go to any one of these chapters. You can see zakat is 33 pages of text. So now everyone tells me, including Christians, Catholics, Protestants, you name it, across the board, that this book is not the Quran. I'm like, yes, but if Islam is a legal system, won't it have legal books? I think that's a reasonable claim.
Right.
And those laws would be written, and since they are lawyers practicing law, they would have legal texts which claim to replace our law.
Right.
33 pages. Now, can you then prove to me, I would say, of course, they wouldn't want to have this engagement with me. Prove to me then, if this book is false, that the 33 pages of law, the hundreds of laws that you'll find on zakat are false, are wrong, are inventions, are Buddhist. That these are, tell me that these are Melkite Catholic practices and not Sunni Islam. Prove to me, show me then. If this is false, please embarrass me in public by proving to me this is not Sunni Islam. And this is completely in violation of all Muslim precepts. And that's never going to happen.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Marriage, divorce. We just went through the chapters on divorce. Justice. See here, you've got all of this stuff. Now, all of this is... Now, I will go here. We'll go have a look at something. There's a handful of these that has the certification of Al-Azhar University. And this is the certification. I'm going to bring this up. There's several. There's like 6 of these in the book, 5 or 6. Al-Azhar, right? This is the most prestigious Islamic university in the world, the oldest. We certify that the above-mentioned translation corresponds to the Arabic original and conforms to the practice and faith of the Orthodox Sunni community, Al-Sunnah Jama'ah, and there is no objection to printing and circulating it. Would you accept that that is legitimate?
Yep.
Stamped by Al-Azhar.
Yep.
So, and apparently I'm a bigot.
That's absurd.
So there we go. So now this has, now I will do the following. I will show you briefly then. I will go to, so this is the Reliance of the Traveler, known as the Umdat al-Salik, right? And now I will go to the Hidayah 2. So I'm going to bring up this one. I'll bring up this one. This is the Hidayah. This was a translation, I believe, in 1791. So yeah, the Hidayah or guide, a commentary on the Muslim laws. Now, typically the structure is someone will write a Sharia text, which is very basic, then maybe 100 pages, 80 pages. Then someone writes a commentary. And then after someone writes the commentary, someone will write a summary. What I'll do is I'll show you, this is volume 2, and we'll go through the index of Zinna, whoredom, right? The punishment for drinking wine, right? Of the carnal conjunction which occasions punishment and that which does not occasion it. In other words, of unlawful sex, right? Of thefts which occasion amputation. So here we have from page 82 to page 107. So you've got 25 pages which describe in gruesome detail how and when to cut off a hand or foot. Muslims say no, it's an allegory. It's just it's not really literal. No, here they explain to you exactly when and how and why. This is not figurative. It is entirely literal. Here we go on the manner of waging war, of plunder. Pirates do plunder, but apparently so does Muslim law.
Right. Hey, Lloyd, you have to excuse me for a second. I have to grab my charger because my computer's about to die. So we just
okay,
go ahead.
And then we'll come back and continue the conversation with you on some of your journey. Okay, I will be right here.
Okay,
I will continue with something else. No problem.
My apologies. Okay, I'll be right back.
No problem. Okay, so yeah, everyone, thanks to the audience. So let us quickly have a look at some of this other content while I wait for Dustin. Right. I want to bring up these texts. Oops. We'll see if I've missed any comments. Hopefully I've not missed anything of importance. No, thank you very much, Tip. Okay. So everyone, what we have here is I want to bring this up. Muslim scholars such as Al-Qasim ibn Salam and Ibn Qutayba al-Dainuri and Ibn Mujahid mentioned different readings of Quranic verses, though they believe that the Quran is literally fixed in a preserved board, right? Allah al-Mahfuz in heaven. It is noticeable that they accept or reject certain readings in accordance with their theological position. So it's interesting that these different variants of the Quran tend to suit certain theological positions. So there were theological disagreements, and the differences in the Qurans suited whatever view that particular group or individual took. And we have yet to overcome problems pertaining to different readings. Sunni scholars reported prophetic sayings which state that Allah recommended the different readings, right? Which is fascinating. And there is, however, he says, there is no authentic document to tell us why only 7 readings were permitted. Muslim scholars claim that the 7 readings were permitted because of the 7 dialects of the major Arab tribes. However, there were different readings, or that there were different readings because of the nature of Arabic script. He says, however, there were more than 7 tribes and more than 7 dialects in Arabia. So he says, no one knows for sure why some tribal dialects were accepted and others were rejected. And he says, there are not 7 systematic readings of the Quranic text, right? Because they speak of at least 14 readings. From the audience, what are your thoughts on that? What are your comments on this? As I'm putting this together in terms of studying the Quran, the idea of a single version of the Quran, perfectly preserved, memorized, there is no evidence even amongst the Islamic sources. There is none. That is a complete myth. They all differ in multiple ways. So your thoughts on that? In the meanwhile, so Ibn Mujahid declared the reading of the Uthmanic text standardized by consensus to be obligatory, and he compelled Ibn Naqsam, another fellow reader, to renounce the claim, right, which he had maintained until that moment, that he could decide for himself on the punctuation of the text. So there was huge disagreement prior. So I just mentioned that multiple Muslim scholars throughout history claimed different readings of the Quran, Dustin, that suited their particular theological position. So
Mhm.
there were theological differences in these different variants of the Quran.
Okay.
And that's the historical view. So your thoughts on that, and we'll.
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to run. I should have made sure the laptop was charged before I left the house, but such as it is, I'm back. Yeah, none of this really surprises me. To be honest, I didn't really get into a lot of the legal stuff. For me, Islam was more theological, and I was just mainly concerned with Allah's attributes, his form, which Muslims didn't like to talk about, but I was very interested in the form of Allah, the view of Jesus, that more of that kind of stuff than the legal stuff. So this is really enlightening to me, but in a very disturbing and bad way. And if I had known this prior to, I wouldn't have converted.
Okay.
I wouldn't have converted. There's no way. There's no way in Hades would I have converted to this religion. There is no way. The underage stuff just proves it's not from God. Like that alone.
Yeah.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
I
No,
lost.
Yeah.
I think
Sorry.
I
You're
lost you
here.
for a sec. Yeah, something just
Yes.
popped up here on my screen here. There we go.
You're still there though. Things are
Yep.
fine.
You can see me, right? Okay.
Perfectly. Everything's good.
Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, that's disturbing. So you left. So is there anything from your story that you would like to add or continue with? We can always divert again. I have some other stuff I wanted to talk about with Muhammad's Gnostic roots, but that's really a sideshow. We can always come back and talk about those some more because I actually like your feedback. I love your input, and you really make me think of things. But tell us your story again. Let's go back to your story, and then from where we picked up from the last time, and what drew you to Catholicism? What made you feel that it's consistent and true? What made you feel that it was superior to where you'd been in Calvinism? And also, maybe we can touch on things like the SSPX. That might be an interesting conversation. Controversial, but interesting,
And a necessary conversation, I think, as well.
Granted.
Especially with all that's going on in the church part. And by the way, I don't know if you've seen this. I think the Holy Father, Pope Francis, is going to be interviewed on 60 Minutes tonight. Well, depending on where you are, so it's Sunday here, but he's supposed to be interviewed on 60 Minutes. And there is a juicy little clip floating around online that I happen to transcribe. Let me actually read it for you guys. Okay, this is really, really good. I love this. I just have to scroll through some text here. Okay. So the interviewer on 60 Minutes asks or says, last year, you decided to allow Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples. That's a big change. Why? Okay, now here's the context, right? The Holy Father, this modernist, this liberal, is on the world stage in front of one of the biggest media outlets. So what he's going to say is going to be broadcast the world over, and everybody who hates Pope Francis is just waiting for him to fall, to kowtow, to cave, to not elucidate the traditional Catholic position. So that's been the background in a lot of people's minds when they hear this question. Oh no, what's he going to say? And they start clutching their pearls. Okay, here's the answer. No. What I allowed was not to bless the union. That cannot be done because that is not the sacrament of marriage. I cannot. The Lord made it that way. But to bless each person, yes, the blessing is for everyone. For everyone. To bless a homosexual type union, however, goes against the given right, against the law of the church. But to bless each person, why not? The blessing is for all. Some people were scandalized by this, but why? Everyone. There you have it. Pope Francis blesses same-sex unions. I hope all the people who reiterated this garbage, this slanderous lie, especially Catholic YouTube personalities and media outlets, I wonder how many retractions and apologies are going to come.
None.
None.
Zero. I assure you, zero.
This is going to be ignored. and it's people are going to act like it didn't happen, except for the people that I've been defending the Holy Father against false charges in the magisterium. They're just going to say, look, I told you so from the beginning. People didn't want to believe it, but here he is standing in the face of the secular media, proclaiming the truth in love to the whole world. And I guarantee you, after this interview, people are going to be very upset with the Catholic Church. Just when they thought liberalism and this homosexual union stuff and transgenderism was going to creep into the church and take it over, you have Pope Francis taking Thor's hammer and smashing it to bits on national television. So, yeah, just wanted to put that out there because that's happening tonight. Apparently, it's airing tonight. So I'm interested to watch the whole interview. But that's a takeaway for sure. A mic drop moment from Pope Francis.
No, I mean, it's that he's finally spoken out, and he has the authority, although I've seen Catholics constantly, very disobediently and rebelliously dispute his authority. They'll say, well, the Pope is not infallible. Neither is your mom.
Yeah. And he's only infallible when he speaks ex cathedra. That's actually a condemned proposition by Vatican I. He's not just to be obeyed in matters of ex cathedra pronouncements. He's also to be obeyed in matters of liturgy.
He's the man in charge of the church.
Yeah, the visible head of the visible church.
I mean, your boss isn't infallible either, but when your boss tells you to work through lunch to finish a report, you don't go, you're not infallible. I only listen to you when you speak infallibly. That's going to get you fired. So you can't say, well, I will listen to the Pope when it suits me, and the rest of the time the man can go jump in a lake. That's not Catholicism. That's rebelliousness and Protestantism.
It really is.
Honestly, according to canon law, that is, I mean, I think there's a massive amount of rebellion. Look, I just say this not because I'm a Catholic, but because I have spent copious hours reading through papal encyclicals, canon law, Vatican I documents. I've been reading these documents, and they unambiguously say this.
Yeah, it's very clear. And everyone talks about being a traditional Catholic. The definition of a traditional Catholic is you hold the traditional view, i.e., you are obedient to Christ's living magisterium, and you defer your intellect and will to the pronouncements of the Holy Father and the bishops in communion with him. Obviously, I think it's St. Alphonsus Liguori who taught you obey your confessor in everything except that which is manifestly sinful. So obviously, if a pope tells you, to go kill someone, you're not going to obey. But in matters of, religion, faith, and morals, he is to be obeyed. In matters of discipline, he is to be obeyed. Yeah. I personally don't have, the whole TLM restriction business. I know a lot of people were upset with that, and I understand why, because it's the people who use the TLM as a shield to disobey and be disobedient to Vatican II. That weaponized the liturgy, and that's what Pope Francis was trying to rein in on, understandably so. I think the collateral damage, though, was those people who went to the TLM just for the love of the Tridentine liturgy and were otherwise obedient. They're the kind of collateral damage, which is unfortunate. But the Pope Pius XII in Mediator Dei says the Pope has authority over the liturgy. Nothing substantial changed with the Novus Ordo. Some accidental things changed, but substantially it's the same. The sacrificial language and element is still there. It's not just a table meal, contrary to what people said. It wasn't invented to appease Protestants, and there wasn't this big Freemasonic conspiracy to inspire the Novus Ordo and put it into practice. In actual fact, if we're being honest, and a good resource for this would be Jongh, The History of the Roman Rite. You can find this book. This is a pre-conciliar liturgist scholar. You can find the PDF online. I think it might be 2 volumes, but he traces the development of the liturgy all the way from the Last Supper to Trent, I think. And it's very interesting, some of the things he comes away with. For example, I think, the Mass of the Roman Rite. Is this by, I don't remember his.
Oh, no, I could have the wrong book.
Is it, can you see the author's name?
Jungmann. Yeah, it's Jungmann.
Yeah, that's it. The Mass of the Roman Rite. Yeah. That's it. That's a standard text and a very illuminating text. So if anyone who thinks the TLM fell from heaven, like the KJV onlyist view of the Bible, you might want to take a look at that. You might want to take a look at this. It's very, very important.
When Jesus, at the Assumption, Jesus It's in Matthew 12, verse 7. He says, "Hey guys, read my book," right? And he dropped several copies down to the apostles.
Or here's the 1962 missile. Go have at it.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. Jesus said, "Read my book, guys. So here's my book. Just print copies and spread this around the world." I'm sure Jesus, right? That's how it worked, right?
I'm pretty sure. I think we got it. So yeah, essential reading for anyone who wants to know about the development of the liturgy and some things that are interesting that a lot of people don't know. For example, ad orientem and versus populum were interchangeable in early Rome. They were both practiced. So for all the people who think versus populum is this terrible, evil innovation, it was practiced early on in Rome, alongside or concurrent with ad orientem. Communion in the hand was a standard practice for the first millennium of the church, east and west. So that right there is interesting, because you have these trads who say communion in the hand is sacrilegious. Well, then what you're essentially saying is the countless martyrs, saints, popes, confessors, holy virgins, all these people for the first 1,000 years, give or take, that took communion in the hand committed sacrilege against our Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, that view, oddly enough, it stems from Martin Luther, who, shall we say, canonized that particular perspective. Martin Luther called all of those who were part of the orders, who were obviously monks. Martin Luther wrote and stated and taught the belief that monks are rats and lice. That was the Martin Luther view. And he basically said that, he was very, very negative, extremely disparaging towards them. So, which means that he insulted anyone who was still within the orders. He said, "These are the rats and the lice that carry the rat king," meaning the Pope. And he was dead set against the orders, which is interesting because Saint Athanasius says that Satan is against the orders, against the monks and the nuns. Yeah. And Martin Luther was dead set against that. He would do anything that was not Catholic. He was just being contrarian in every way.
Yeah, I mean, we can see in St. John of Damascus, in his exposition of the Orthodox faith, we can see he details the reception of communion in the hand very clearly. And St. John of Damascus is considered by many the last of the church fathers, so that's very late. Let's see if what's the responsibility.
I know, just yeah. I mean, someone has to be in charge, or who's in charge? Look at the Orthodox Church. You've got who's in charge. So everyone's in charge. So no one's in charge. So everyone has a view. Everyone has the opinion. What is the difference then between opinion and doctrine? Nothing. And versus if you have a guy that with a buck stops, he makes the decision.
Right. And there is this view that's popular amongst the Orthodox that every bishop is Peter, and they contrast that with Catholic ecclesiology. But let me tell you something: true Catholic ecclesiology has the Petrine ministry at every level. So you can say, in a sense, every pastor is Peter to his church, every bishop is Peter to his diocese, every archbishop or metropolitan is Peter to his area. And it extends to the universal level, and there's a universal Petrine ministry. So we do have a Petrine ecclesiology that isn't just pyramid top down; it's at every level. And I think this is elucidated in, I don't know if it was Cardinal Ratzinger or Pope Benedict when he was which one, the successor of Peter in the mystery of the Church. That's a document you can find on the Vatican website, which is a good read as well. Just there's true Catholic ecclesiology has the Petrine ministry or dimension at every level, not just the universal top-down pyramid.
That's interesting. I had not heard that expressed that way, but that's really interesting, and that's an education for me as well. Couple of points. Tip: time is precious. Only one fell from heaven. Jesus descended and ascended, and he established a church, not a publishing company.
Correct.
Fair point. And the guys, I always forget to do this. I'm terrible with YouTube stuff. I'm supposed to say things like, buy my shampoo, buy my toothpaste, and remember to floss once a day at least, and things of that nature, which I almost really do. But please do like, do share, do subscribe. And also the link to Dustin's channel is in the description. It's in the name of the title of the video as well. You can click on it. It'll take you to his channel. So the links are there. And please do subscribe. Let your friends know. I keep forgetting because my views are up enormously. I have like 3 times the monthly views that I had just like 3 months ago, but I completely forget to tell people to subscribe. So for those of you, I get I have 3 times the views, and I have 1/3 of the subscriptions these days. So please do subscribe if you do enjoy this. And please, if you like Dustin's thoughts and comments, his channel has more such discussions. So please go over to his channel and subscribe as well. Support him. Thank you. Yeah, please go on.
It's just funny because over the last, I don't know, what's it been, 3-4 years, I've had the most amazing guests. I've been blessed to have the most amazing guests. I mean, Scott Hahn, Jimmy Aiken, Tim Staples, Brant Petrie, John Bergsma, all, like, you know, the best of the best. Thanks be to God. And I don't seem to garner that many subscribers. I don't quite know why that is. Maybe because I don't post controversial clickbait material and I don't bash the Pope and the Magisterium. Maybe that's partially the reason why, but I do need more subscribers, not because I'm in this for my own vainglory or whatever. I just want to get the message out there. And my message is not, it's not standard in the sense that I touch on temple theology and its connection to the Catholic Church, right? So that, I think, is quintessential to understanding Catholic Christianity. And this is something that Catholics need to recover and rediscover. And also those Protestants and others who are outside the church who want to know whether the Catholic Church is biblical and stuff like that. They need to know this material. So please subscribe and share. And you can also check out my Journey Home episode on EWTN.
That was very good on EWTN. Your interview on EWTN was fascinating. It's really, really interesting. So look up EWTN. Dustin Quick. It's a great interview. Well worth watching, everyone. I watched that. Also, watch his John Salza interview. He's got John Salza and
Andrew Bartel.
Andrew Bartel. Fantastic interview. I watched them both. They are very good. Highly recommended.
Yeah, that one was, if anyone wants to know the title, it's SSPX Roundtable with John Salza and Andrew Bartel. Okay. I think, I don't know if Don Del Maso was on there. He's got a channel called the Logos Project.
I don't think so, but they've got a 3-way that I've watched as well between the 3 of them. It's really good as well. It's excellent.
Yeah, great stuff there.
So, by the way, I was planning to do a history of the
nervous order
of the Mass called the Nervous Ordo, the history of the Catholic Mass. So that's a plan that I have in my head to discuss. I'm busy. I've been doing research on this because it's the Nervous Ordo. If you do this one, you're going to hell, because that's the standard message these days, right? If you follow if you follow the Nervous Ordo, you will go to hell. Will I go to hell if I go to this Mass? That's why that's my working title for now on this, the Nervous Ordo. But just so, by the way, SSPX, I want to bring up something on SSPX which you just mentioned. So just to segue there, I'm just bringing this up full screen. I just wish. So this is from the Sacred Congregation or Bishops, July 1988. The priests and the faithful, let me just bring up my larger. The priests and the faithful are warned not to support the schism of Monsignor Lefebvre. Otherwise, they shall incur the very grave penalty of excommunication. And they state here, there's no dispute that the episcopal consecrations, when he consecrated 4 bishops, took place without a pontifical mandate, without the Pope's permission, and indeed against his express wishes. Now, I have heard many quote-unquote Catholics, and I use that term kind of loosely here, state that there was no clarity and there was no jurisdiction, all of those are untrue. Canon 1382 states that a bishop who consecrates another without a pontifical mandate incurs excommunication. Now, this is an ipso facto excommunication. The Pope then confirmed it later with an expressed excommunication. So it happened twice. Mm-hmm. And the first type is called automatic, as the delinquent incurs it simply by committing the offense specified in the law. Right? So, this is mentioned on an SSPX website, oddly enough, by this article. And you can find a Catholic view on this as well. This is factual. Few people are constantly claiming the SSPX, and I don't, it's not an error. You cannot have that level of consistency in the face of the evidence. They are lying about their excommunication. They're lying about the schism. They are schismatics. And I'll show more evidence on that. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, they definitely are schismatic. Now, as far as what about the average layperson who loves the Latin Mass but doesn't have access to it and goes to an SSPX chapel because they love the liturgy, but they don't want to imbibe other maybe schismatic orations that come from the pulpit or what have you? That's a different story. But those who formally adhere to the schism, i.e., the people who know better, and like priests who thumb their nose at Rome and say, "I know what Rome says, and I don't care. I'm choosing to disobey."
Right.
They're in schism,
Right.
and they're not. They don't have. That's the thing. They don't have canonical mission. The bishop in his diocese has canonical mission from the church to go out and preach, evangelize, baptize, and do whatever he needs to do in his diocese. The SSPX don't have legitimate jurisdiction, and they claim, well, yeah, we have jurisdiction because the church is in a state of emergency, so it's a necessity. Well, guess what? Per church teaching, only the church can determine when there's a state of emergency, not a group of private individuals.
Yeah.
That's not correct.
I'm actually planning, these slides are not done. These are still in the raw state. So please understand the slides you're seeing here, these are unfinished. These are not properly edited. I'm still in the point of shuffling slides around and making my sort of logical chapters. I don't make chapter headings. I mean, I don't do my slides like that, but I have a sequence, a flow. And so this is all very raw, but I want to mention this is one slide here. Then I'll do a couple. This is Pope Paul VI. Now, I've seen many Catholics state that Pope Paul VI was an incredibly damaging pope. He caused harm to the church, and they dislike him for whatever reasons. Okay, so that's the claim. But he says here, Pope Paul VI writes to our venerable brother Marcel Lefebvre, right? The unbearable irregularity of your present position. He's not being nasty. He's being charitable. It is not in accordance with truth and justice. It arrogates to itself the right to declare that our apostolic ministry departs from the rule of faith, right? And to judge as unacceptable the teaching of an ecumenical council celebrated according to a perfect observance of ecclesiastical norms. These are serious accusations. Your position is not according to the gospel and the faith. To persist would be a grave damage to your sacred person and to those who would follow you as a guide in disobedience to canon laws. Have the humility, brother, and the courage to break the illogical chain that makes you alien and hostile to the church. That's the Pope writing. Now, of course, either you accept this or you reject the Pope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you see how, I mean, St. Paul VI is being grave and serious, which he has to be, but he's also being very charitable. He's showing love and concern for the Archbishop's soul. He's not just railing against him and being derogatory or anything like that. He's being very charitable, but he's also not holding back from the gravity of the situation. And it is grave. I mean, the only bishop in the SSPX, I know the 4 excommunications were lifted, but Marcel Lefebvre still remains under excommunication. For anyone who's curious. I
just want to respond to this. J. Dyer first needs to debate William Albrecht. So moving on.
I'm not here's the thing. People ask me, do I do debates or would I debate? I don't
It's
debate.
a performance. It's the one who has the best performance that wins. It's really, really about the facts. I'll have conversations, discussions, and present facts, and the audience can decide, but debates are performative, and it's really just an act most of the time.
You can have a totally erroneous position and on the cards still win a debate. If you're a better debater, and you know the tactics, you know the fallacies, then you could win a debate and your position might actually be incorrect. And I'm not a debater. I'm a conversationalist. I don't do debates and I never would. Especially not Jay Dyer. I mean, sometimes I watch his content because I find it educational in some respects, and it's funny when he goes at people sometimes, but if you're on the receiving end of his lashing, you're not going to be able to get a word in. If you have a dialogue with him, you're going to be lambasted and called an idiot and this and that, so it wouldn't be productive anyway.
I want to mention something. So let me do this slide. This is slide 44 of my present. This is running into almost 200 slides already, I think, this particular one. Would you do a couple of these shows with me to discuss because I'm going to be doing a very deep dive into canon law, into the ecclesiastical councils, into the findings, the statements of the Pope, so that we can see it from the documents. Not my opinion, not a 2-hour monologue of Jay Dyer has these long monologues, and I try to watch, and after 20 minutes, I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? Where were we? Where are we now? What are we talking?
Right.
I'm like, so I like to work off slides because everyone can see exactly what I'm saying, what my sources are, what my reasoning is, all of that. I don't just have long conversations staring at the screen saying, My name is Bond, James Bond. I have a cool opinion, and you want to watch this show because of my voice, my good looks. But let me quickly go through this. This is from the Vatican. Now, this, you can see here, this is the Vatican. You might have heard of those guys. Okay, I'm going to bring this up. So you can see for a fact, this is the Vatican website. This is the Vatican. The Pope lives there, just in case you guys don't know. On the excommunication for schism, which the adherents to the movement of Bishop Lefebvre incur. And this is dated 1996. Dicastery for Legislative Texts, doctrinal document. Right? Mm-hmm. See the source from the Vatican. Heard of that place? Sounds familiar? It's not a coffee shop or an ice cream shop in Rome, I guarantee it. Nota from the Motu Proprio Ecclesia Dei of 88 and from the decree Dominus Marcellus Lefebvre of the Congregation of Bishops. It appears, first of all, that the schism of Archbishop Lefebvre was declared in immediate connection with the episcopal ordinations carried out in 88 without pontifical mandate. It is also clear from the above-mentioned documents that this very act of disobedience, this very serious act, constituted the consummation of a progressive global situation of a schismatic nature. A point on this I'll make before I go to the next point, and I'll first give you something a chance to comment. This document that I'm going to show you was based on a priest who was suffering from his parishioners pestering him. What the heck is the situation with the SSPX and Lefebvre? And he said, please, I'm asking, please clarify this so I can tell my parishioners. So the Vatican wrote this document we're going to go through in a moment. But your thoughts before I continue, please.
Yeah, I mean, the language that the Vatican uses is very, very clear. Schismatic. You can't get any more clear than this. The language is it's crystal clear. There's no doubt or ambiguity about it. So, and this is from the source of sources. This isn't somebody's opinion. This isn't Lloyd's opinion. This is official sources from the Vatican, from the highest offices, and the SSPX was always thought to be in schism, and they didn't shy away from using that terminology. I mean, it's very clear. And the schism was serious and is serious. So,
right. Yeah, so let's continue. Now, this document calls Lefebvre's movement schismatic 22 times, if I counted correctly.
22.
Now, how many? In 2 pages. In only 2 pages. Let's have a look. Okay, from the Motu Proprio, the schism of Archbishop Lefebvre. Okay, situation of a schismatic nature. The root of this schismatic act, the formal adherence to the schism, which is to be understood the movement of Archbishop Lefebvre, explicit reference to the schismatic nature of the above-mentioned ordinations, and the schism of Archbishop Lefebvre. Unfortunately, the schismatic act is to be considered schismatic, okay? And his excommunication for schism, those who adhere to the schismatic movement, formal adherence to schism, and sharing the substance of the schism, sharing their schismatic spirit, context of the schismatic movement, the sin of schism, the crime of schism, substantial schism, and subjectively schismatic. They call it, I think, 22 times in 2 pages. Now, is that vague and ambiguous by any chance, Dustin? Or am I just lying out of my mouth like this?
I've never seen this document, and I'm actually blown away. I mean, 22 times in 2 pages. You can't get more clear than that. That is just wow. Black and white.
So what are they trying to say? Yeah. Sorry, sarcasm is a major superpower of my audience as well.
So what are they trying to say? Yeah.
Dude, it's a mystery to me, Erwin. It's a mystery. I'm gonna have to get ChatGPT on this one. Maybe you can help us out, Dustin. Perhaps you can try and explain what are they trying to say here. Is this a recipe for making chocolate cake, or is this something else?
No, I think it's pretty clear. And they try to say, oh, you know what I wanted to ask you about. What I wanted to ask you about was fulfilling the Sunday obligation. I don't want to get too far in the weeds. We were going to talk more about my journey. If you had any questions, I mean, you can you know,
Oh, sure, we can switch to that by all means. I mean, by all means, we can.
you can intersperse, you know, questions or whatever. If you have any questions, or if the audience has any questions, you know, by all means, you know, forward them. But I wanted to ask you, Lloyd, about the Sunday obligation, because I've read some reputable apologetic sources that say you can go to the Sunday obligation at an SSPX chapel, provided you don't imbibe their schismatic attitude or positions.
Correct. No, because the Pope made an exception not to justify or to legitimize the SSPX. He did it as a mercy for the salvation of the souls of the good Catholics who go there for whatever reasons. Maybe it's the closest church, maybe it's the only church, whatever the reason might be. Maybe they have a preference, not on a doctrinal position, or but they just have a liking for the Latin Mass, and they go there for the whatever reasons, and to make sure that they receive a legitimate Mass, and you know that the sacraments and others are valid for them during that Mass. The Pope made an exception. He did not legitimize the SSPX. Look at here. This is a raw slide again. Code of Canon Law 534. I've been through it. Code 844, 844, 388, 1245. Okay. From the Code of Canon Law, the SSPX, Society of St. Pius X Mass, does not meet the necessary Sunday Mass requirements under canon law. It does not. I have tackled this from when I go through these slides one day, I will show from multiple angles. I will repeat the same point from multiple perspectives to show they do not meet the requirement. They were given an exception purely for this as a mercy to the souls of the Catholics that go there. But no, they do not. It's absolutely untrue. You can go there, yes, but it's an exception. It is not the rule. It is not in any way an endorsement. Does that help to answer?
It does help. And, you know, people need to understand when Pope Francis gave them faculties to hear confession and preside over marriages with the approval and cooperation of the local bishop, by the way.
Yes.
This was a mercy during the year of mercy to try to bring the SSPX back into the fold. It wasn't a umbrella type of full acceptance. And people try to make it seem like that. Oh, Pope Francis legitimized the SSPX. No, he gave them special faculties for a special reason under a special season. And like technically, if you want to be technical, yes, their masses are valid, but they are illicit because they don't have mission from the church. Their masses are valid. They have obviously
do not have mission at all.
Yeah. The Eucharist is valid, but its celebration is not lawful. It is not licit.
Yes. In fact, it's called sacrilege. You'll find that various popes, including Pope Pius X, said it's basically sacrilege what they're doing. According to, I have all of this stuff. Look, I don't know it. I have not. I'm still prepping this, so I haven't memorized the content of this. But I've got all of these questions covered with multiple sources going back hundreds of years, not just from Vatican II, to show that even the popes that they refer to as the popes that they revere, even those popes have made clear statements that they are wrong.
Yeah,
and they do not have extraordinary mission. They absolutely do not. So yeah. So back to your story. I mean, without getting sidetracked, what would you like to discuss from your side? I mean, maybe the audience also has questions, but you had an interesting journey. So again, what? Tell us about that. You know, let's jump back into that.
Yeah. So just to recap, in case anybody missed last time, I mean, you can always go back and watch the show. Me and Lloyd did last week, but essentially my journey was baptized Catholic as an infant, brought up Protestant, converted to Islam in university with the help of the Black Hebrew Israelites in the Nation of Islam, creating a blend of Christianity and Islam after having a radical encounter with Christ, but not fully prepared to let go of Islam, to leaving Islam entirely, to embracing Calvinism, to then entering the Catholic Church of my baptism. So that's a full circle snapshot journey. I don't think we discussed much of the Catholicism part. I kind of think we ended there last time.
So go through that. That's fine. I'm happy to listen to you speak to everyone about that.
Yeah. So I had when I was still Calvinist, I started reading the Church Fathers because I'd watched this video on YouTube showing how the Church Fathers were Calvinists, and they pulled a bunch of quotes and and just tried to piecemeal a theology together. And I said at the time, oh, well, I don't really care about the early church. I cared about the Reformers, and I cared about Paul Washer and John MacArthur. But it's an added bonus if the early Christians were Calvinists. That's even more cool. So I kind of just left it there. But I was reading, then I started reading the church fathers for myself and realizing, oh, they don't teach monergism. There's a synergism. There's free will. You can lose your salvation, all these different types of things. So I remember visiting a Baptist pastor because I was looking for a church home. And we talked for a good 3 hours. And I said, Pastor, I've been reading the church fathers lately, and they don't seem to be teaching limited atonement. They don't seem to be teaching the bondage of the will. They don't, they don't preach double predestination. And the pastor just...
Well, the connection just died. Dustin,
Sure.
the connection. Sorry, you just died for a few seconds.
Oh,
The pastor just...
Yeah, the pastor just told me if the church fathers don't agree with Paul or the Reformers, by which he meant the Bible, then you can just disregard them. And that satiated me for the time. I was satisfied with that, and I was excited because now I could start going to church at this nice Calvinist church, and it's Orthodox Calvinism, and I don't have to tiptoe around the robust doctrine of Calvinism as I did previously in my other church. I'm from Bosnia, ex-Muslim. Do you know about the Bosnian Christians? No, I really don't. I always associated Bosnia with Islam. So, no, I'm not familiar with that. Sorry,
no, me neither. Yeah, I'm afraid I can't comment.
But so I started reading the church fathers for myself. I then watched a debate between Tim Staples and James White. And the whole time I'm rooting for James White because he's a Calvinist and anti-Catholic. And you got to understand, what I thought about Catholicism at the time, I only got from anti-Catholic preachers and figures. I never knew a real Catholic. I never stepped foot into Catholic Church. But, when people say, oh, I thought the Catholic Church was the whore of Babylon and blah, 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 I was so anti-Catholic. They couldn't hold a candle to what I believed about the Catholic Church. Yes, I believed it was the whore of Babylon, but also they sacrificed babies to Lucifer underneath the catacombs. They're responsible for UFOs, for genetically modified food, and basically every evil that you can considerably imagine was created by the Catholic Church.
What led you to believe those things? Was that because of what Mr. Washer and all the others were saying? Because I've watched some of his stuff and it's cringe.
It is cringe, but no, I actually, I was seeing a herbalist who helped me with my health at the time, but he also happened to be a rabid anti-Catholic, and I got most of these conspiracy theories from him. And he would show me pictures. He showed me this one picture of a bunch of Jesuits, and he said, look, they look like an army. They're ready to amass and kill all the true Christians. And he would just feed my head with stuff like this. Right?
Yeah.
So I had a lot.
Say, why didn't the Jesuits fight the Nazis? Why didn't the Jesuits go out with their machine guns and go and, like, I didn't realize the church had a standing army, but okay.
Yeah, he was a walking Jack Chick tract. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, they had a secret computer with all the true Christians' names, and they were going to kill every one of them, and they were going to usher in the Antichrist via some alien technology. Like, it was just insane. So I had a lot of hatred and biases to overcome. So you can imagine how difficult that must have been.
Why were you susceptible to those biases and the hatred?
I think so. Here's something that I've kind of discovered. Religions and philosophies that have very little elsewhere in common or otherwise in common have something in common a lot of the time. That is, the Catholic Church is some sort of boogeyman and has corrupted something or is behind something.
Mm-hmm.
So
conspiracy mindset.
Yeah. Black Hebrew Israelites, Nation of Islam, Sunni Muslims. I mean, look at Yusuf Estes. If you watch this silly video, oh my gosh.
I've met him. I've seen him live. Didn't meet him, but I was with him live. I mean, in a talk, and it's he's got a personality as a character.
He does. I could see how people would be attracted to him and want to explore Islam if they don't have sufficient knowledge. I could see that. Well, I was one of those people, right? So I get it. But he said that Alexander the Great created the Catholic Church, and he said you can. He said it's on their website. Look it up. To a crowd of thousands of people. Look up the Vatican's website they say that Alexander the Great created the church. So Muslims hate the Catholic Church, the Black Hebrew Israelites, the Nation of Islam, Protestants. So basically, all these religions have one thing in common: the hatred of the Catholic Church. And
No,
so,
they want to be the Catholic Church.
right, and I imbibed all of this stuff. I let it soak in
Oh.
and permeate my being. So it was a part of my spirituality, really, to hate Catholicism, or what I thought
Mhm.
Catholicism was. So I had a lot of hurdles to overcome. And what did it for me, what started to break down the armor, was a debate I watched between Tim Staples and James White. So without even watching the debate, which was like 3 hours long, I already had my mind made up. James White is the winner. He's victorious. He's my Calvinist hero. But the more I actually listened to the content, and I thought Catholics didn't know their Bible. I thought Catholics didn't preach Jesus Christ crucified, and I didn't think they were on fire for the faith, full of the Holy Spirit. Interesting, because today's the day of Pentecost. But here Tim Staples comes quoting scripture, talking about his profound love of Christ, but he's also talking about things I'd never heard before, like the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, about ecumenical councils, about the papacy, and he presented a really compelling case. So of course I shut the debate off, and I'm deeply disturbed. Yeah, the issue of authority, absolutely. So I was deeply disturbed, and so I found myself, and this is when I was in the process of moving from my parents' house and getting my own house. So I had like a mattress on the floor in my bedroom, and I'm up all night, all hours of the night, sweating, literally sweating, as I'm researching
Okay.
Catholicism. And my wife finds out that I'm on my phone all night, and she thought I was cheating on her, because I was studying this issue so intensely. It took me over, and I was just obsessed. And she thought I was
Right.
cheating on her. And then she said, when I finally came out and said, I think I need to be Catholic, it's the true church, which Jesus established, she wanted to divorce me, because
Why?
she said, you're a stranger to me. I don't know you anymore. I didn't marry a Catholic. So she had anti-Catholic biases as well. So that was ready to break our marriage apart. And so I was trying to hit her over the head with all the apologetics, and she's not having any of it. So I'm getting frustrated. Why can't I get through to her? What if our relationship ends? What am I going to do? Do I proceed with this? Do I let it go? So I met with my pastor, and he said, stop with the apologetics. Just show her your love for the faith by your actions. Be quiet. And one day there might come a time where she'll ask you a question, and the light can come in through the cracks, and you can start discussing things civilly, but let her take the initiative. So I did that. It was as hard as it is for me to do. I shut my mouth because I live in my head a lot. I like to talk, and I just stayed quiet, and she continued to go to mass with me. But one night, unexpectedly, after a work Christmas party, she said, "So I remember you saying Protestants took books out of the Bible." I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, who gave them the authority to do that?" That was her aha moment.
I stole that question from you. I've used it on my channel a couple of times in the last 2 weeks.
Well,
It's a legitimate question. I think it's a very good question. So what led her to that? Tell us more about that.
I didn't see, that's the thing, because she wasn't vocalizing anything. I wasn't really aware of what she was thinking. That when she came out with that, it totally shocked and surprised me, because I had no idea that even had entered her mind, or that it was something that she even cared about. Like, she has a very simple faith. So me, I'm more the intellectual type. I live in my head a lot. Her faith is more simple, but it's solid. So we complement each other very well. But I had no idea this was going on in her mind. So when she came out and asked me, I was completely shocked, but also very excited, because now what the priest had told me was coming true. Here's an opportunity. She took the initiative, gently explained it to her, and see what happens. And from then on, we started.
What was your answer to her? That'd be interesting to know.
Yeah. Well,
What convinced her?
in a nutshell, I didn't give the typical sort of 60-minute Catholic apologetic, which says, "Oh, Martin Luther just ripped the books out of the Bible." No, I said the reformers initially moved them to the back of the Bible and said they were useful for instruction and history, but they weren't really inspired. And then it was subsequent reformers who actually removed them completely, but that didn't happen until later. Nevertheless, the reformers took it upon themselves and said that they had the authority from God to do this, and they had the correct canon. And the reason why they took these books out is because the early Christians And the subsequent medieval Christians saw Catholic doctrines in them, like the Maccabees and prayer for the dead, for example. And so because that didn't align with Protestant theology, they wanted to remove any vestiges of that from the scripture. And so they took those books out. Interestingly enough, this is what the rabbinic Jews did to the Christians. They didn't want to go with the Septuagint because the Septuagint spoke of the Messiah. This is why the Christians used it. And as a reaction, the rabbis said, no, we're going to go with the shorter canon. So it was kind of like a replay of the Protestant Revolution way back then, and it repeated itself.
The Reformers and Luther also went with the Masoretic because they stated that any book that's not in the Masoretic is not legitimate because it's not in Hebrew. Then, of course, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they discovered 3 of those books at least were in the Hebrew. So what happened is, at that point, all of the Protestant churches turned around and said, oops, we're sorry, we made a mistake. We're adding this back into the canon. Legit, true story.
Yeah, true story. Yeah. But yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls kind of put the kibosh on that whole idea. So I thank God those were discovered. And the Essene community has a lot in common with Catholicism. I mean,
well, also, you know what's for instance, the Birmingham Quran proves Islam is true because you've got an early Quran, even though it's only 2 pages. Whereas the entire Dead Sea Scrolls, thousands of them, that's fake. Doesn't prove the Bible.
Oh, of course.
True story.
Of course. Trust me, bro. Yeah, so that was her in, so to speak. And our relationship then changed. She went to mass and she said to me, wow, there's scripture at every turn. We used to bring our Bibles, right? Because we were accustomed to doing that at our old church. They would say, open up your Bibles to chapter and verse so-and-so. So we were used to carrying our Bibles around. And she used to get angry when we would go to mass, and she would say, why are there no Bibles? You know, that's proof that the Catholics don't read their Bibles. There's no Bibles in the pews. There's just hymnals. But after her heart started to warm up and open, she said to me, you don't need to have a Bible in the pew. There's scripture at every turn. All the gestures, all the movements, all the readings, they all have like scriptural undertones and symbolism. It saturates it. And you basically read the whole Bible in a year going through the lectionary. So,
and if you are really a good Catholic or good Christian, you'll go to Bible studies, you'll go to, you'll have that. And thank you again, Blue Light Moon. Yes, I think that's fair. The Dead Sea Scrolls were a godsend. I mean, that really changed the landscape and affirmed a great deal of the Bible. And it also proved the Gnostic texts to be false.
Right.
Yeah. And also remind us later about the Bosnian Christians thing. Just drop that question in the comments later, and so I can get around to that and have a look. Thank you very much, Blue Lightning.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that was our initial experience with Catholicism, and then 2014 is when I made the act of faith. So it's been 10 years where I've been a professing Catholic. Time's just flown by, but I entered the church with my wife at Easter Vigil in 2015. Which was obviously amazing. And my priest said when I was going through RCIA, he said, you could probably teach it, but I want you to go through it anyway, just for the community and the fellowship. So it was a great experience. And then as the Francis pontificate started to unfold in subsequent years, I actually was on the verge of becoming a rad trad. I
was going to ask you that, because people did ask that. Why didn't you go crazy on the trad wagon?
I had a spiritual awakening is what happened. It wasn't intellectual arguments per se. It was a spiritual awakening and pure grace and gift from God that completely changed my heart. So before, when I would go to mass and I would perceive what were, in my opinion, liturgical abuses, I would leave the mass angry, swearing, foaming at the mouth, sometimes shouting. I have a bad temper, and I have about 4 mental illnesses. So I've had a big struggle and still have a big struggle, but that's beside the point. Had a very bad temper, and
Is that caused by having children? Because I heard children can produce mental illness.
Yeah, I would say, because when I started,
it's inherited from your kids, apparently.
Yeah, it can be frustrating. I'll put it mildly, but yeah. So I would leave the mass angry and swearing, and sometimes foaming at the mouth, shouting to myself in the car, why is this like this? I read about Catholicism in books. This isn't Catholicism. this is something else entirely. Reminds me of Protestant church and blah, blah, blah. I would get so angry. And then I almost converted to Orthodoxy in 2016, actually, over the fact that I was so angry about the liturgy. And I visited an Orthodox in America parish. My conversion is typical in some ways, but in another, it's very unorthodox, pardon the pun. With the groups that I've experienced and the things that I fell into, those are very not typical, and that's more elucidated in the last episode we did about talking about Islam and the Black Hebrews and the Nation of Islam and that whole thing. But so I almost converted to Orthodoxy in 2016. I was going to an OCA parish, and I love the incense, I love the chant, I love the smells and bells. All that spoke to me. Right, this is the aesthetic stuff that I was missing in my local parish in Roman Catholicism. So I remember going to coffee hour after Divine Liturgy, and people would come up to me and my wife, because we were new faces, right? And they would say, "Oh, what are you guys doing here? Where are you from?" So we would say, "Oh, we're Catholic, but we're just I skipped Buddhism." One of my friends actually became Buddhist and came back to the church recently. So that's a whole other story. You can find on my channel, actually. Just type in Dustin Quick, Holy Smokes, Nick Chinapi, Buddhism, and he was actually Russian Orthodox, and he was Buddhist at one point. So I would be going to coffee hour, and I would be talking to people, and they would make statements such as, "Oh, the Catholic Church broke from the Orthodox in 1054," and I would say, "Well, actually, it's more complicated. The schism was between two individuals, and it wasn't really cemented until the sack of Constantinople in 1204, and even up to the 1700s in the Middle East, there was still intercommunion. So that doesn't really work for me. It's a nice story, but that's not how history played out." And I found myself defending at coffee hour, defending the Catholic Church, even though I wanted to be Orthodox so bad. I remember when my then spiritual father gave me permission to pray the rosary because it had given me such peace and was such a staple of my prayer life. He said, "Oh, it's okay to pray the rosary." I was so excited. I'm like, this is what I need. This is what I needed to get my foot into Orthodoxy. This is the sign. I don't have to be anti-Latin. I can pray my rosary. And I was just so intent on becoming Orthodox. But I remember leaving the church one day, and my wife just said to me, "You're not going to be happy." She's like, "The Pope has authority. This isn't going to sit with you. You might be happy for a few months, but it's going to haunt you." So there was that aspect of it. And then I talked to a friend who is the editor-in-chief at 1 Peter 5, who has unfortunately embraced radical traditionalism. But back then, this same individual, I love him. He's a great guy. He's a very holy man. But at the time, he was defending the Novus Ordo and Pope Francis and Vatican II against me, and now he runs 1 Peter 5. But what I took from him at the time was quintessential to the spiritual awakening that I had. And that is, okay, I'm coming back to the Catholic Church. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going into schism. And he told me about redemptive suffering. And he said, apply redemptive suffering to the way you participate in the Mass. And so if a hymn bothers you and you have to offer it up as a sacrifice, say to yourself, "Lord, this hymn bothers me. It drives me crazy, but maybe there's somebody else in the congregation that it speaks to, and the Holy Spirit's going to stir their heart. You might not like it. It might not be your preference, but somebody else, it might resonate with them, and God might touch them through that hymn, even if you don't like it." If Father ad-libs at a certain point or makes a mistake, pray for him. He has a hard job. When you are in church, just place yourself in front of the altar like Mary and John at the foot of the cross. It's all about the Eucharist. It's not your preferences. It's not aesthetics that are substantially what's important. It's about the Eucharist and your participation. And so I ended up changing the way I participated in the Novus Ordo. I would do things like hold prayer hands through the entire Mass except for the homily. I would receive kneeling and on the tongue without an altar rail. I would cross myself as the priest processed and recessed out of the church. Just little things like that. And what I reminded myself by doing these actions and these gestures, not to say, look at me as some kind of Pharisee, like I'm holier than you, I participate in Mass better than you. It was more of, I know that I'm in a sacred space, and I need to do what I need to do to dispose my soul and my body to receive the Eucharist worthily. And doing these gestures and these movements help me do so. And I
So the sacraments ground your faith in a practice as opposed to in your imagination by sola fide, sola fifis.
right
Because that's
and
what I found. It's Gnostic. It's really just about imagination and feeling, not grounded in actual history, tradition, and something that's solid,
right. And
something
so
material. There's a
um
denial of the real, in a sense.
yeah, exactly, the practical. And so what stopped me now, I'm at a point where I walk into a school mass by accident. I didn't know this was happening, but there's a grade school where my kids go that was attached to the church. And this was a children's liturgy that I stumbled into one Sunday. And I'm thinking, oh no, what's going to happen? A year ago, I wouldn't even have entered the church. I would have just left and been like, this is an abuse. Why are they letting children participate in the liturgy? And I would have got so angry. But I remember going to mass, receiving the Eucharist, and I cried. And I felt just as fulfilled as if I left a TLM, right? I felt just as
Okay.
fulfilled as I left a TLM. And it was a children's Novus Ordo liturgy. And I felt just as fulfilled and happy and filled with the Holy Spirit and the joy of Christ. And I knew at that point, God had changed my heart. So ever since then, every mass, I do the same thing. I hold prayer hands. I cross myself and bow when the priest processes and recesses out of the church. I don't receive kneeling and on the tongue anymore for two reasons. Number one, I have cerebral palsy and my condition's worsening, so I'm not able to do that physically
Sorry
as
to hear
well
that.
anymore. Another reason is my study of the liturgy and communion in the hand is not a sacrilege. Just make
Hmm.
sure that you do it properly. Try not to drop the host, obviously. If there's any, try not to leave any crumbs. Do your best. The Lord understands, but receive reverently, and that's fine. So I receive on the hand, sometimes on the tongue standing, but I don't really have a preference. It doesn't bother me either way. Usually I receive not on the tongue from Eucharistic ministers because half the time they're not used to doing that. So they might screw it up a little bit. And I had the host jammed into my mouth diagonally one time from a Eucharistic minister. So I don't do
Right.
that again. Right. I just receive on the hand from them. But yeah, so Catholicism to me, like today, perfect example, right? I go to mass. It was the Feast of Pentecost. There's no incense. There's no chant. But you know what? The priest, God bless him, he's devoted to the Eucharist. He loves his parish. He said the black, did the red, and that makes me happy. I'm even with all the scandal, even with all the stuff about Pope Francis, all that stuff. I'm more happy now than I've ever been. And that's good because my life otherwise is such a mess. Like I have bipolar type 2, I have PTSD, I have somatic symptom disorder, I have general anxiety disorder. I have all these disorders and mental illnesses. So if my spiritual life was as messed up as my mental life, I would be in a complete and utter place of wow. God bless you, Matthew.
Wow. Sorry to hear that.
Mine is very mild, thanks be to God. I was told that never be able to walk or talk. I'd be a vegetable in a wheelchair, basically. But thanks be to God, I beat the odds, and I hope you have as well. I'm glad to see another person come out with cerebral palsy. That's not very common. So yeah, I am happy as a Catholic, and I'm joy filled. And my faith, although it's intellectual in a sense, I understand the faith. I teach the faith to the best of my ability, not in any official capacity. I'm just a simple layman. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a theologian. I don't have authority. Yeah, I've read Cardinal Sarah about communion and receiving on the tongue. It's just not historical. I don't mean to be disrespectful or rude, but it's not historical. I mean, read Saint Cyril of Jerusalem, read Saint John of Damascus. Um, I think the very first mention of communion on the tongue and kneeling was the Council of Rouen in the 860s, 870s, and that was brand new at the time. The reason the medieval church adopted that view was for practical reasons, and they didn't want to. The host was made out of a different material, and they wanted to receive on the tongue. There was practical reasons for doing it. It wasn't necessarily theological, but for the first 1,000 years, by and large, everybody received communion on the hand. So that's just history. I mean, you could take, not you personally, but anyone could take it or leave it. It's an apostolic. I mean, do we think that the apostles celebrated the TLM? No, they faced each other and they received on the hand. And if that's good enough
Mhm.
for, if that's good enough for Jesus and the apostles, it's good enough for me. I don't
Right.
go into a mass thinking, oh, this is too irreverent for me, I'm not going to go. I walk out the door. I don't condescend and lower myself to enter this parish, but guess who does? Jesus. Jesus lowers himself onto every Catholic altar, no matter how irreverent the mass is or how bad the decorum is. He leaves his, if he had any pride, he left it, and he goes to that altar, he condescends, and I'm too proud and too good to go into that liturgy. So when I think like this, it changes my mind, it changes my heart. And don't get me wrong, beauty is powerful. It's important, right? As lay people, we should expect the best from our priests. The liturgy should be celebrated with reverence, because we're talking about the real presence of Christ here in the Eucharist. So yes, that is important. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be the be all end all. You don't need to go parish hopping. You don't need to flock to a TLM. If everybody left their Novus Ordo parish and went to a TLM because it suited their aesthetic preferences, guess what would happen? All the Novus Ordo parishes would die. The faith would die. So instead of flocking to a ghetto and being insular, stay reverent where you're planted. You might influence your parish. You might set it on fire person by person, and the whole parish life could change because of your example. I've had people come up to me after Mass and say, I've seen the way that you participated in Mass. I've never seen anyone do that in my life. And they would congratulate me. But all I can do is sit in the back of the church and beat my breast and say, God, be merciful to me, a sinner, because that's not something that I can boast about. That's a pure grace, a pure gift. God knew how tormented my heart was, how tormented my mind was. And so he gave me peace. He gave me a strategy that works. It's practical, and it feeds me. It feeds my family, and I feel spiritual peace. So my mind might be tormented a lot of the time, but at least my spiritual life is like a rock by God's grace alone. Nothing that I've done.
Powerful, really powerful. It's been nearly 2 hours. I was thinking we might sort of wind down, about the 2 hour mark. I normally go no longer than an hour and a half. I typically do an hour 15 or 20. But shall we sort of wrap up here, and maybe we invite you back? We do another talk in a week or two. How would you feel about that?
I would feel great about that, brother. Honestly, thank you so
Yeah,
much for having me. And
yeah.
I'm sorry to take so much of your time.
No, that's okay. No, it was great. I mean, I wanted to give you the last 40 minutes or so just to finish your story, because we were discussing other issues, but obviously also to finish your story. So I didn't want to interrupt you too much, except to focus on relevant questions. But that was really powerful. And also thank you to the audience. I really appreciate your generosity. Thank you very much. As you know, I do spend some of this on subscriptions. I have to pay for subscriptions. I have to pay for books. I have to occasionally do things. Obviously, this running a channel it's not free. Believe it or not, it's not free. And but so thank you very much for all of your kindness. And yeah, also I've put out a lot of new material recently on Islam and the Quran, especially the historicity of the Quran. Please have a look at that. Many short videos. I will be doing more longer discussions on its history. Would you like to join me one day on one of these Quran discussions? Because your input, your thoughts, Dustin, are really interesting. Your perspectives, your knowledge, it's really interesting to get as an insider to say, hey, I didn't know that. They never told me that, so that others can also learn about that. It's really interesting having that perspective. It's better than me just spouting facts, It's actually it puts a real human side to it.
Definitely. And the majority of what you showed today was never revealed to me at all. And had it been, I probably would have never been Muslim. So
yeah,
it's a big deal.
Yeah, no, I mean, we all stumbled our way through things, but you picked yourself up and you learned. And I mean, you did a little bit of meandering, but you got there eventually. And it's a powerful lesson. Your testimony was extremely personal right now and very powerful. I think the audience would agree with that.
Yeah, and I just want to remind people, like, look, you can change your spiritual life. You can change your spouse's life. You can change your children's lives. You can change your parish life if you would just change your perspective on the Mass and change the way you participate. You could you could have a revelation. It could change your entire spiritual life. You can let go of the anger. You can let go of the news headlines about the church inside and outside the church. You could give Pope Francis the benefit of the doubt, interpret him in charity, read the magisterial documents, be obedient to the magisterium as a sheep, not a blind sheep, but a sheep with discernment. Listen to the voice of Christ via the living magisterium of the church. Be at peace. Let it go. Let it go.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. Thank you. I mean, it's a really powerful place to end. That was just a powerful statement. It came from the heart. I think everyone could sense that was really from the heart. And it means something to you because you have real issues you are dealing with. And this really helps you in your life in a real, visceral way. It keeps your family together.
Correct.
And I think that must mean a lot to you on that basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last question I'll take, guys, before I go. Do you have interest in investigate French philosophy? Look at my talks on the French Revolution, please. I've covered French philosophy, which is I've actually done discussion, and I will do more in the future. Just I'm doing so many lines of research, but French philosophy is basically it's pagan Greek trash. Really, it's honestly it's pagan Greek trash. It's all it is. It's recycled Greek paganism. It's recycled trashy Greek philosophy from 500 BC. That's all it is, really. There might be some good things to it, and the philosophers and historians will tell you, look at Descartes. He said this amazing thing, and then of course there's the one great thing he said, and then there's the 15 absolutely incredibly stupid, laughably clownish things he said that they somehow forget to show you. And I will show you those things. We have discussed that in the past. But thank you, Dustin. I'll end here. Well, thank you, Amelia, Dave. No, thank you. So, Dustin, this has been really enlightening, really powerful. Is there more to the story that you would want to share in the future?
I have no shortage of stories. So, yeah, including the time I made a priest cry by calling.
Okay, well, so let's chalk that one up. We'll talk about stories. I mean, can we sort of half and half between discussing topical issues, Islam, Gnosticism, whatever the case might be, from your perspectives, because you've been through the mix. Your experiences touch on all of this, which for me is fascinating, and then also your personal journey. So sort of a show and tell on both sides of it. Would that be right?
Sounds great to me. And I just want everyone to please check out my Journey Home episode on EWTN on the YouTube channel, and please subscribe to my channel and share it. I guarantee you guys will love the content. There's more sarcasm. Yeah.
So guys, thank you very much for those who donated. I'm really grateful. Thank you. And I do not, I do not work for Boeing, and I'm suicidal. So yeah, thank you, Dustin, for making this a really good discussion. Thank you all for your input, Philip, for your questions, and others for your questions and comments. So yeah, guys, thank you. So we'll call it a night, and we will we'll continue this conversation. Next weekend is tough for me. I have my mother-in-law visiting, so maybe Sunday. But also I need to bring Thunderous on. But we'll plan. So within a week be okay. Otherwise in 2 weeks, if that would work with you.
Yeah, sounds great to me. Yeah.
Probably in 1 week. Let's try and schedule for 1 week from now, and we'll take it from there.
Sounds great.
So yeah, but thank you. So we'll end the stream here. So guys, thank you very much. It's been a couple of hours. It's been a fascinating 2 hours. I've learned a great deal. Hopefully so have you. So God bless everyone. See you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.